Lord has blessed us with 5 daughters. They've been raised up, of course, to honor truth and integrity, and several of them have been specifically trained in being aware of child abuse. Miriam, who received the first reports of the abuse going on at Sankey, she worked for Head Start in Connecticut and had training in how to deal with the abuse, how to recognize it, how to deal with it, how to report it, all these different things. My oldest daughter, Martha, worked at international school and was actually formed a guidance department and actually put in place their child protection policies and procedures. My other daughter, Rachel, had run a child's care in her home, and she had to be familiar with all the procedures. My other daughter, Elizabeth, is a nurse practitioner in Philadelphia, very much aware of how things should be handled when abuse is concerned. And Priscilla is actually the one who found the contacts for Department of Homeland Security, and she works for an international school in special services. And she also knows what the task is and what responsibility is when abuse is reported, how it should be done. Now, I had reported the abuse at Sankey to Tom, and he was not cooperating. I then talked to the pastor of the megachurch of the one project where I'm managing, with which we're most closely connected, and he referred me to a team they have that deals with this. That would be a pastoral intervention team to deal with another Christian leader like Tom Randall when he's not properly handling it. As they got into looking at it with the information I gave them, they realized, just like we have in many things, unless the church and Tom Randall himself are willing to push an investigation, it's very difficult to do. Furthermore, if they wanted to do it from the legal side, they found out that Toto and Tom had cultivated military and police contacts in the local area, so that the contacts that the church had in the military and police were not strong enough to be able to take action from their level. They would need something higher up, and they were going to research that. Well, I had turned all this stuff when it was obvious Tom was not going to investigate and take action. And after the time he met with my daughter Miriam, it was obvious I turned everything I had over to the Pastoral Intervention Committee. I'd also been meeting with my own attorney because, knowing what my daughters know, I wanted to make sure that I was not going to be blamed for, say, for example, if I turned this over to this committee, should I have reported it to authorities instead and all that stuff. And for the state stage of the operation that we were at that time, my legal advice was to go ahead and see what the church can do before we go on. My daughters were not happy with that, having had some experience with how long it takes for church processes to take. And so they were very concerned with the reports that were received. And the one daughter got the contact with Department of Homeland Security. Department of Homeland Security, again, this has nothing to do with me. I've heard it been said that they say that I went to the U.S. Embassy and convinced them to have the Philippine NBI, National Bureau of Investigation, arrest Tom. I never went to the U.S. Embassy, and I never even went to the Department of Homeland Security. My daughter informed them. They did their investigation. They interviewed Shirley, the teacher, and my daughter Miriam. They were the two girls who got their letters and reports and passed them on to me. And they referred the case to the NBI. Well, then, as the NBI began investigating, they did ask for my assistance, particularly in finding the boy who had run away, who had been raped while he was at Sankey. And they needed a first-person testimony. And so we were able to find the boy who had run away, and he talked to the NBI agents on the condition, one, that for now he'd be anonymous. He was terrified of any reprisal by Toto if it was told. And two, he wanted his sister protected, who was still there, which they tried to get his sister away from the Sankey home after he'd run away, but they would not let him go. And from what he says, Toto was using her to keep him quiet. And so she was fine, she was safe while there, but it was the chip that Toto, the director, was using to keep the runaway from going to authorities with what had happened. Now he's finally going to authorities. His big concern is, what about my sister? They assured him that they would protect the sister. And so when the NBI chose to do the raid and arrested Toto, his son, and Tom, all of the children were brought into DSWD custody. And the idea being that there would be no threat when they were released. Unfortunately, as things turned out, through the influence and intervention of a U.S. senator who contacted the Philippine embassy at the request of Joe Coffey of CCC, the NBI was forced to back off the case, and they threw it all to a provincial court where the bias was very great against the victims themselves. Furthermore, it enabled Toto and Jake to have bail. The NBI agents had told the runaway boy, that Toto and Jake would never see bail. They would be in jail until the charges and conviction, and then they'd be imprisoned. But then after the intervention, they were allowed bail. That changed the dynamics. And when the young people were released from the DSWD custody, his sister went back to the grandparents' home. He had been able to find his grandparents after running away. He didn't find them till after he'd run away. Went to grandparents' home, and when the sister noticed that there were armed goons riding motorcycles past the grandmother's house, he was concerned. And so we actually took her in, brought her to our place, which is about 2 hours away. And we actually, Miriam, took her under wing and helped her through high school and helped her get started on college and try to get a job and all this stuff. But it was difficult for to first come out and talk because of his fear, and then having come out and talked, to not even be able to be guaranteed the protection. He is still willing to talk. We have a video he just made a couple weeks ago, but he also is not letting his address be known. He's still living in fear of reprisal for bringing this out to begin with.